chapter 8. We're going to hopefully, well, we're going to finish up this week. Like I said before, if we get through before class is over, just put your heads down and be quiet, like in the classrooms. And I will, in full disclosure this morning, I've got to be careful about what I may say of a derogatory way about Debbie, because her mama's here this morning. So, anything I've said before, y'all keep it to yourself for one more week anyway, okay? But we're in chapter 8, we start with verse 8. I'm going to go ahead and read all the rest of 8 through 13, and then we'll go make some studies about them. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. In verse 8 here, he's describing the word food. He uses it in kind of a generic sense. It's the Greek of it is broma, B-R-O-M-A. And it actually had no particular reference to sacred meat or even to meat in general. Basically, it was food, which is just a broad general sense. He was saying that the kind of food a believer ate was really of no consequence for godly living. Those days, meat. Oh yes, because meat back then was, it was kind of like, I guess, a delicacy. We could be expensive, and they ate animals and those things.
Even the Jews, there was a lot of things they did not eat. So.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
everything then, okay, was a big change.
Yeah. It was probably generally reserved for like special occasions, things like that. But it also could be that those who stopped going to the temples of idols might even refuse to. They could eat, not even eat meat at all. And you go back in chapter 7, Paul had previously, he had made a kind of a comparison that, the sexual expression was not in of itself wrong, but he also said that here the eating of meat in itself is not wrong, but it's rather determined by the circumstances which both were done in. And we studied about that before. So let's move on to verse 9. While Paul does say that neither eating meat, whether neither eating or not eating commends believers to God, but rather our liberty as such should not become a stumbling block to the weak. And we talked about that briefly, and kind of tongue-in-cheek some of it a little bit. But can you think of examples today where something we may do, whether it's eating or whatever, that could be a stumbling block to our weak brethren? Don't be shy.
We got a lot of people now that are believing that alcohol is all right. And whether it is or isn't, that's personal language. You go out and get bars and stuff all the time. Somebody sees it, that's not very good.
Well, Ben, as you brought that up, we're going to cover that a little bit later, and I may go back over it again as we get to that point. But, all right, that's one example. All right. Okay. All right, I'll tell you what let's do. Ben, as we're going down that road right now, let's go ahead and turn to 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 through 5. Well, I guess I can back up and start at the very beginning of 1 Timothy chapter 4. Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God in prayer. So that kind of covers the food part of it, in my mind. Now let's go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, and we'll get to Rick's point. do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. All right? Can anyone in here, and this is a conversation, you know, there are things that God states specifically, you know, assemble on the first day of the week to do this. There's several things there, okay? In that verse there in Ephesians, do not be drunk with wine. I was up here one day and was talking to Mike, and I never heard this analogy put like this before, because anybody in here, can you tell me how much do you, each one of you, whether you do now or not, I don't want to know that, because I think it's wrong, period. That's just me. I state it. I think it's wrong. I'm not going to judge you. That's God. But if you're willing to say, how much can you drink before you become drunk? How much? Mike says, I think he had a guy one time told him, he said it takes 6 beers for him to become drunk. So if you drink 1 beer, you're 1/6 drunk.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay?
How much food does it take to be glutton?
Can't answer that question.
First bite,
Gluttony is a sin.
first bite, you drink the glutton in.
It could.
That's the same way drinking.
Yeah.
I don't drink anymore. I used to.
Yeah.
And I drink because I need to want to stop. That's the case with everybody pretty much. Not really. No, I don't think so. I think, Paul told Timothy, drink wine for your stomach's sake.
Right. Drink a little wine.
He didn't say how much.
Yeah.
He said drink wine for your stomach's sake. I think when we start telling people they can't have a drink, we're being judgmental. Because one drink does not make you drunk unless it's high alcohol and you have a low carb. If you cut it off, you had a drink with your meal. There's nothing wrong. I don't drink in front of anybody if I wanted to have a drink, simply because it's a stomach bug for those like yourself who think drinking is total sin. I'm not gonna be that stomach bug. But I don't think we need to judge people for having a drink. It doesn't say don't drink, it says don't be a drunkard. What are the differences?
I don't judge if you or anybody else. That's up to God to judge, and that's why I said what I said a while ago. I personally believe it's wrong. For me. Okay? Brian?
Well, Jesus turned water into wine. I know some people try to make the argument that was grape juice. If you read that, it's hard to imagine that it's grape juice. If you understand what drink most people. So, I don't know, moderate drinkers, people that will drink beer before they go to bed, they've done it for years. I don't know who really said it was ever done. It helps them sleep. I don't know, it's kind of weird.
I think there's a distinction though. Back at that time, water systems were very good.
Right.
One of the things they did was to have wine because the alcohol killed stuff.
Impurities. Yeah.
I think we just really have to watch in everything that we hear here to be exact as today. We've got to be guidelines, but I don't know that we have to be specific so much.
Worked out for the guy one time that he wouldn't drink wine because of the scripture, but he could drink whiskey all day long.
I think he was looking for a loophole.
Well, like I said again, I'm not the judge of it. I drank it one time years ago before I was a Christian. Didn't know any better, probably. But it's just I've seen so much, and I know you have too. There's people that it always starts small, but it doesn't end up small most of the time. And you know, and I have struggled. I've asked a question, and I may have brought it up in here one time before. You know, we have prescribed medications, oxycodone, hydrocodone, those things. They're powerful. People get hooked on them. These opioids, it's a really rampant thing. But they don't affect me. I mean, when I had my kidney stone, I took one before we left Russellville, and we got to Memphis. I took another one, and I drove. I told her to pull over. I can't stand you driving my truck. I drove. You know, and if I'd have had a wreck and they would have tested my blood, well, they probably would have whatever to me. But it just did not affect me like a lot of people. Sleeping pills are the same way, other than Ambien, which I'll never take again. But You know, I don't make that judgment. I just know it's, if you look at it and you see it, it's, sometimes it's just not good. And so I'm erring on the side of caution and staying away from it. Correct. Because that's specifically. Yes. Do you remember, was it a week or two ago when Mike was gone? I think Patrick spoke to us and he made mention about, or maybe it was Mike, about a lot of time, you know, maybe out and somebody let a word slip in front of a preacher. How do you feel? Oh, my word, I do. You know, normally when, but he's a human being. The fact that he's a preacher is really irrelevant. We shouldn't do it in front of anyone. Okay, now take the same analogy. If we walk into a restaurant or a bar, as Jim likes to call it, and Mike's sitting there drinking a beer or mixed drink, what do you think? He preaches on Sunday, and here he is out here drinking on Saturday night at the bar. Well, it's a restaurant, but they... Right, and he gets up here and preaches about it, well, then what? Well, what kind of example has he set for you and I and everybody else? Well, I had a story, I can't remember exactly how it went, but, well, I'll go back to this. Jim asked me on the way out the other day,
Because all my favorite restaurants have a bar in them.
he asked me, do you go to bars? He asked me, do I go to bars? Well, I knew right where he was going. So I just kind of paused for a second, and I said, well, do you go in Walmart? Or do you go to a gas station? They sell liquor and they sell beer. Walmart gives to the, if you just saw it, they have proclaimed their Pride Month, and they're really going into that. You know, Target lost $9 billion over this deal. That's a little side subject, but they sell beer. They sell alcohol. AT&T contributes to a cause that I don't believe in. But where do you go that any good in any service is owned by somebody that contributes to something that I don't believe in? Olive Garden, Jim said Olive Garden. Yeah, they sell alcohol, but I don't participate in it. But what if my truck broke down in front of the liquor store and somebody here saw it? I had to pull over in front of the liquor store. Oh, y'all know where I saw his truck last week. What have you done? You made an assumption first, and you gossip second. How do you know what I was doing? Unless you come to me and ask me. I could have been in there. One of you, there could have been a drunk that I've been talking to for forever to try to get them to obey the gospel. And they called me. They were tempted to buy a beer, and I went down there trying to talk them out of it and come on. And you saw my truck. Well, he's down there buying liquor. And you might. So I think we can just go, Mike.
In Tiptonville, Tennessee, there was, I converted a young lady and her husband. Someone said that she was in the bar and couldn't walk. This was a Wednesday night, and I told my elders I was going down to get her. And I walked into that bar, of course, everyone knew me because they had a TV program. There was silence. And I went, got my sister in Christ out of that environment. I didn't hear anything about it, but that's nothing unusual. But also wonder what we would have thought if we saw Joseph running out of Potiphar's wife.
No clothes on.
Yeah.
I think it's like she was saying, but it's really, we're supposed to set examples, like John's example of his work, how they cuss so much and he doesn't, and they notice it. People are just gonna notice, you know, so you can kind of live your life the best that you think.
But I want to make sure we understand something. I am not judging you if you do. That is for God to do. That's for you. You know, we all can look and read, and it's basically, that's just the way it is. We all come up with different interpretations or different thoughts about it. I'm not going to say to me, I think it's wrong. Ask me. If you look at me in a different light, well, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I can't help that. That's the way I view it. That's the way I look at it. So I'm erring on the side of caution myself. But I don't want anybody to make the understanding that I'm judging you if you do or that it's wrong. It's a sin.
Almost all the commandments we are have act we can do wrong, though, if the heart's not right.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, you kind of how far we
saying I can't go eat after service today, because that's where I was planning on going. I'm sorry.
Saying how much control do you wanna give these people?
Oh, I agree. I agree. Well, yeah, a lot of states did, yeah. But let's try to move on where we can try to get through. But if we as Christians justify what we're doing by saying that we have the authority to do it, but it does weaken the faith of some, that's where we get into what we're talking about, Mike. Are we showing love in that regard? We have to think about them. You know, like I said, I told you last week, sometimes that's been hard for me, but I think the way it has been presented to me, I didn't understand it. And like I told Mike, you weren't here, and I couldn't see it, but I told him on the very front last week, we could sum up this chapter real easy. It's a sin to eat liver, gizzards, chitlins. I've even added raw oysters and Chinese food. Okay, if you come into my house, you will not get those things, and if I go to your house, I will not eat those things. As long as we got that understanding, we're okay. But that's a hard thing. Do we consider our brother in everything we do?
But it also says, and we need to be mindful of this, usually the weaker brother in the Bible, the one that is offended, is untoward. Another thing, if eating of meat was wrong, it was offered to idols, God would have said, don't do it. But he tells me, if it offends me, I come to your house and you're eating gizzards, for the sake of my conscience, don't ask where it came from. And so you've got an obligation on both sides. Some people are going to walk into your house and be offended at everything. Others, like you say, there is no condemnation.
Especially these hog fans that come into my rebel room. You may be offended, but it's my house. I won't be offended if I go in yours, I just won't go in it. But what about the Christians who take social drinks? Some of them say they have this authority. All I can say is, okay, it says do not be drunk. I don't know at what point I get drunk. Generally speaking, the Italian people, if I'm not mistaken, most of them, they drink wine a lot. But if you look at them, the type of foods they eat, now I don't know what causes it, but they die of old age. They drink wine every night. You know,
Years ago, there was a big deal about how good wine was for your health like this.
mhm.
Some other doctors came out and said you get exactly the same benefits from grape juice without the alcohol.
See? And while I was talking about the drugs a while ago, I asked the question about marijuana. Okay, it's not legal, but yet drinking is legal. You know, the state, not, but, so what's different about marijuana and, I'm not trying to justify it at all. I'm still against that. But what's the difference in it actually and a oxycodone, hydrocodone, those type things? Other than the fact that one is legal and one is not legal. It's prescription. I just don't see a good end game to it. To me, that's just me. So stay away from it. I know medical,
On the cancer patient,
right?
there's some of them that cannot stop vomiting without.
Right.
And it is a prescription. It's given by
Mhm.
cancer doctors, palliative care, that kind of thing. So there is, you know, there is a use for oxycodone and stuff.
Mhm.
But what you get on the street, same deal with marijuana. There is a prescription of marijuana that is useful.
Mhm.
But then the stuff on the street is just somebody wants to get high.
There's hardly anything we take is wrong.
That's true.
Well, they abuse the prescriptions of everything, not just
Yeah.
marijuana. I mean, that's one of the big things right now, oxycodone is given away so easily, they're trying to restrict it.
Yeah.
Alabama is trying to legalize marijuana. Here is the selling feature. Look at
But look at Mississippi, because like the casinos, they put them down there in Tunica. I think they had 9 or 10. I think there's 1 or 2 left. Under the pretense of all the money that was gonna bring in and make your school system so good, drive through Tunica and see what you see. Building after building, just dilapidated, worn down, not there. I mean, because the money, when you got people involved, the money doesn't go where it's supposed to, which to me was wrong to begin with. But anyway, let's try to move on. John, I waded in it again, didn't I? Just in a different way. But in verse 10, Paul, the Corinthians here, Christians at Corinth thought that their knowledge and thinking to idols were worthless. In their minds, that presented no problem. But there again, it was causing the weak brother and sister to worship idols. It may not have been an issue to them, but it was to those who were weak. And by thinking that they all had the knowledge, yet they were actually defiling the conscience of their weak brother and sister, misleading them and causing them to compromise what they believed. So Paul here in verse 11 is posing a question. Would a weak brother be ruined by trusting in others' knowledge to justify eating meat of that sacrificed in the temple? So, and also, because of your knowledge, would they be willing to allow that knowledge to negate the purpose for which Christ died? Or, in other words, did their knowledge mean more to them than their love for their brethren? Have you ever been in those situations where, phrase it like this. Have you done something that maybe you didn't know at the time, offended someone, but yet they came to you and told you? Has that ever happened to you? I'm not asking necessarily for the example, but has that happened?
It's happened to me in this building. But it wasn't something that was said offensively. It was taken offensively.
Right.
It was misunderstood. And so, when it says go to your brother, communication. It's just that simple. And I don't know if it's personality trait. I don't know if it's how you was raised. I don't know if it's very.
Not what gets me in trouble.
So, but some folks not willing to do that. And it can involve all the things we've been talking about this morning, seeing you at the bar. Well, one person would say, hey, Keith, I see your truck over the bar, everything all right? Anything I can help you with? Is there something, that we need to have a private conversation about, or are you good? There's other people that would just ignore you from that day on for the hypocrisy that you presented being in that situation, and everything in between those two things. We can talk about it, we can just,
I heard.
well, Melissa's not here, so I can tell this story.
Let me record it.
Yeah. She was parked near the liquor store. Yeah. Well, she was parked near the liquor store, and I knew where she was, and I know why she was where she was at. But I called my buddy and had him call her and say, "What are you doing at the liquor store? Or will you pick me something up while you're there?" Or something like that. And so there's all those scenarios, we talked about whatever. And your upbringing is gonna have a lot to do with your empathy towards others and their weakness.
Right.
If you was raised by a drunk, there's 2 ways you could go. My dad was a drunk. I can either
Right.
act like him, or I can not act like him. And so, and your attitude towards any sin, your attitude, if your dad cheated on your mom all the time, your attitude towards adultery is gonna be completely different that a teaching tool for a weaker brother? Absolutely. Has to be. It has to be a teaching tool. There would be no other reason for it.
See, and that's why I think that, I mean, it's good for this discussion that, you know, Paul, even talking about meat and idols and offers, we don't have that issue today. But what we are talking about is call it the stumbling block part. None of us know what goes on behind closed doors at your house. I could beat Debbie every day, and she's stupid enough to stay with me. But we're all hand in hand, open the car door and love her and talk about her great out in public in front of people. I mean, and that's where people see what they see, and that's why, to me, some of this stuff we're talking about, we don't want to do to cause them to sin. They're going to think what they're going to think, but we just don't want to, I guess, contribute to them. Because if I want to invite somebody to come to services here, and maybe they know a little bit about it, the church, but if I'm out there drinking and dancing on Saturday night, well, how can I very well think that I could have any influence on them to come worship and become a Christian if I'm doing those type things? And what does that send message to the rest of you here? I mean, I definitely, you know, I think right or wrong, we have a tendency to hold Mike, Patrick, Bob, Steve, Marion, and Mark to a little different standard because of the positions they have in the church. But they're human beings too. They are commanding on certain things, so I think we just have to be careful and present ourselves the right time, you know, not cause someone to stumble. If I've got a problem with drinking and you're gonna sit in front of me and drink, well, that you're causing me to stumble.
You ever watch Blue Blood on TV? That's a neat show. It's about the police commissioner in New York. They're all Catholic and good people, but they have a culture where they sit around and drink whiskey all the time. They've got a water glass with a little bit of whiskey in it, and they think nothing of it. All the time they're drinking whiskey, and if you were to say something negative about that, they'd look at you like, Matthew, this is normal. This is normal. A lot of this that we're talking about is the culture that you're in. A lot of foreign countries drink wine, beer as a part of their culture. Germany, vodka. And I'm not defending it, I'm just saying, that's what this is talking about. What's normal and what's weak, what's considered weak.
Right.
And it's up to us to be the smarter, rise above it, understand.
But one thing God does as a Christian, that word, what does that really mean? Set apart. You're not like others. Okay? And if I've got a neighbor that's what he does is drink, and then they offer me one, and I don't participate, I'm set apart, I'm different. Okay? Let's try to move on. We've got to get through, because I'm tired. I need a break, and y'all need a break from me. In verse 12, Paul was showing them that their relationship with God is also bound together with others in the body of Christ, and that's Colossians 1:24, that Christ's body is the church. Conversion was to result in a change of lifestyle. They were to be different. By sinning against the brethren and wounding their conscience, they also sinned against Christ in this regard. Because Paul, what about on the road to Damascus? What was said to him then? What did Jesus say? Why are you persecuted? Why do you persecute me? He was on his way to kill Christians. And it's kind of like you do it unto them, you done it unto me. That was what Christ was saying. He was going to murder them. In doing this, he was also persecuting the Lord. The very last verse there, Paul made a pretty bold statement. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Go back, and you can go back in the comparison in Joshua. Joshua's vow, Joshua 24:15. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That was bold. Nothing wrong with it. But Paul, that was, like I said, that's a pretty. I won't say. If you don't like boiled cabbage, I'll never eat it again. That's kind of like what Paul was saying with regards to the meat part. But I'm gonna do those things. You don't have to worry about some of those other ones, but
You know, Paul was also willing to get beaten,
he suffered.
and be lost in a storm and
Yeah.
almost, so much more.
Oh, yeah.
I doubt he would be able to keep up with his example.
No, I doubt it. I doubt it. You know, that's why a lot of times I don't mind saying this. You know, Paul, you know, in his statement about he was the chief of sinners, I pray a lot. I said, no, Paul ain't got nothing. I'm the chief of sinners. If we can't humble ourselves to put ourselves down there, we just think too highly of ourselves. You know, I may not have sinned that day, but I still think that I could have done better. You know, we just have to be humbled about that part of it. But Paul's conclusion was that compromise with idolatry was totally unthinkable. Number 2, to be one who worshipped idols was wrong. And 3, to share meat that had been sacrificed to a false god was idolatry. I think we can take those things from what Paul is in this chapter here. But even today, is idolatry existent in our culture, in this country? Name some.
You don't miss that. You go more. There are people who miss church.
Yeah.
Line promoted.
Yes.
They are worshiping that symbol
Right.
before they're more so if you're on this thing.
Okay. Okay.
Now we're talking little sins and big sins, no?
Okay. Debbie, make a note when we got special food for Rick and we got special food for Tammy when they come to our house. Okay? We got good food for Tammy and not so good for Rick. But there are different forms of idolatry. Basically, if you think about it, idolatry is anything that's put before God. That takes precedence in your life, which is the most important thing to you. We had an instance back home years ago. They came to church. They were Christians, you know, professing to be Christians, but yet they got to where they never came on Sunday, and never, well, didn't come during the week either, but quit coming altogether. So we had our occasion to talk to them. The deal was Sunday is the only day. He worked 6 days a week. Sunday was the only day off. So he was going to take his boat. He was going to go out to the lake or do whatever on his day off. Wasn't going to worry about the Lord. That's my day. That's idolatry. That's call it all kinds of things. But many forms that I wrote down, fortune tellers, people they believe that stuff. I mean, I can remember, I didn't believe in it, but I would sit down at the newspaper and just what your, I don't even know what astrology sign was. Horoscope, yeah, there we go. My mind's gone from that kind of stuff now, but it was just funny to read it and say, man, but you can, in your mind, kind of like she says that I've said for all these years, that she begged me, you know, to marry her for 5 months. She says, you actually believe that now. Now, I believe the truth, but it's kind of like that, you know, you can make your mind imagine that horoscope is exactly applying to your life. Psychics, palm readers, these tarot cards or whatever, even though, like I said, the newspapers carry horoscopes. But ultimately, Paul was more concerned about possibly causing his brother in Christ to stumble than asserting his rights, which Paul had the right to do, and even the knowledge that he had. He knew there was nothing about idols anymore, but they were having trouble with that. So for him to sit down and eat that meat or eat in the temple where they were worshiping idols was wrong because it sent the wrong message. Basically what it amounts to. Paul was definitely intent on being a spiritual mentor. He accepted that responsibility. But he also realized that each Christian had to decide how they were going to live their life, how they were going to conduct themselves. There again, the eating of meat in the temple was idolatry, even if the weak brother didn't see it, because those things were gone after those days when Christianity came on the scene. Final application is stated earlier. We ought to take skip back, I got another page there. Whew. There is to be no compromise with idolatry, period. The religious climate that exists today is totally different than in Paul's time. And I really doubt that there's been anyone here that had any experience of any pressure in any way to sit down in a temple that was eating food sacrificed to an idol. I mean, I doubt that. So we can't really understand some of it. But there's no doubt that idolatry has not been totally rejected in this country. Maybe it has by us, you know, in some form. But there again, I was talking about a while ago, examples of that. I was told, almost 10 years ago, that I better enjoy that new truck I bought because I was going to be buried in it. And I'm still driving it. So, I would love to have a new truck, but I don't have to have it. That's right. That new truck, I might be in a divorce too, but there are no doubt, meat's not one of them anymore, but have you ever experienced a situation where you had a person that would be offended by you eating meat of any sort? What is it? Is it on Fridays they offer fish? What is that? Well, I can't remember. Catholics? I think they don't even follow a lot of their teachings from years ago themselves anymore. They kind of like tongue in cheek now. I don't think.
The Pope can change what they believe, and that's one of those changes.
Is it? I don't keep up with that. Just wondering if anybody ever had it. I'm not offended by you Hog fans. I just pray for you that one day you'll wake up and see the light, as I did. But Paul had two thoughts in mind here, and we'll close out pretty quick. He is concerned that not only our actions be right in themselves, but that our actions also be perceived as right by others who are watching us and attempt to live right. And I know sometimes that gets kind of hard for us to do probably. But can we compromise our faith in God over concerns and interests that are more important to us? The answer is yes, we can. Whatever takes precedence in our lives, whatever's more important to us than God's glory is an idol. And Paul warned about greed, and we get on greed, Colossians 3:5. Family, possessions, fame, skills, sports teams, vacations, hot spots, so many things can and often are idolatry because they're put before God. So in other words, it's wrong to put anything before God in His glory. Even our example in these matters can influence others. And as I said earlier, he's not here today, so I'll tell him when he's back. But I told you, and I said what I said a while ago about being a sin, I think, to eat liver and gizzards and all that kind of junk. Well, a brother here had the audacity to tell me, either Sunday night or Wednesday night, after I stood up here and read this chapter and said it was a sin, he didn't believe me. He went out and he ate liver for lunch. So remember, Brother Dale Buchanan, we're going to get him when he gets back. He went out and ate. It's okay, but he shouldn't have told me that. Well, I thank you for